Hi, in this video I want to maybe do another kind of vague concepts video, and I want to talk about beauty, attractiveness, and happiness. Those are two other words I think I wanted to cover. So when we're talking about happiness, happiness is a state of mind. I'm pretty sure many people have heard that statement before, that platitude. How happiness is a state of mind. It is a state of mind. It's a projection where we're satisfied. We're feeling something. But once you're satisfied, are you really happy? No, you're satisfied. You're happy to see someone. But are you really? I think there's other words you can use better than happiness. I'm happy to see you. I'm happy this. I'm happy that we went here today. I'm happy, or are you satisfied that you went there today? You're glad that we went there today. Happiness, a feeling of joy, or something like that, of fulfillment and joy, and and beauty and attractiveness. This idea that you can be attracted to someone, but it's usually like back to this word love, where beauty is based on love. So you have a bigotry towards someone because of your attractiveness, your preconceived notions, your preconceived conditions, where you find someone more attractive than someone else based on your own conditions, and to an extent your own conditions that brought you to be, and the conditions based on the environment and your interactions with the environment. So yes, beauty and love are more in one in how you interact. So beauty based on love and lust and things like that. You find something beautiful or attractive based on your own past experiences with something and someone, and so beautiful and love are almost synonymous with one another, because usually the things that you find beautiful you love, but not necessarily. You find them beautiful in another way. You can apply beauty and things like that, attractiveness, to any number of things. But you can obviously use words to make more distinctions and make sort of single out beauty as one thing. But based on our current definition of beauty, you can find someone's voice beautiful, you can find someone's story beautiful, you can find some aspect of their character or something else beautiful. So you can't necessarily single it out as something else. So it's more has to do with pleasing to the senses, I guess. So something beautiful, something pleasing to the senses. Sort of like happiness is a projection based on an internal feeling of joy and fulfillment. Satisfaction that you did something. You're happy because you satisfied your hunger, something fulfilled in you. You're happy, sort of like, it's not really a word because we're obviously happy based on a negative circumstance and getting out of one, but there still is, we're still experiencing, we're still getting out of somewhere. So even if we're getting out of a negative, we're still getting out of somewhere. That relative scale that we're on of getting out of some kind of negative still exists. We're still happy, or we're still satisfied once we've been out in a deprivation. So it doesn't matter that there was a deprivation to begin with. We're still satisfied in the end. And I think satisfaction is more an applicable word when describing that kind of situation. Happy, I would say, is you're happy. It's a state of mind, joy and fulfillment. So yes, I think joy and fulfillment are probably better words than happy, but happy can just be joy or fulfillment. So happy, I think it's more vague because it's about being satisfied and getting, there's no true happiness, but we're obviously applying happiness to the situations that we are now, sort of like veiling happiness behind a curtain, where because there isn't a real positive, there's still a positive in relationship to a negative, because we're applying it to the situations and the reality that we are in now. So regardless of, applying a word like happy and saying it doesn't really exist, it's vague because we're getting out of a deprivation, but we're applying this happiness based on the experience, even if we don't recognize that we're getting out of a deprivation leading into some kind of positive, a satisfaction. That's why we're deriving this word happiness, even if we don't necessarily know the game that we're playing. Even if we do know, we're applying happiness to an idea of getting out of a negative, and that's where the word comes from. So all these products of words and things like that, the word products that we create, are made out of these situations that we don't necessarily think they apply to, or they're misapplied to these situations, but they've been applied to these situations in passing, and just using the word as a go-to word and such and so forth and so on and whatever. So you're applying happiness based on the circumstances that life creates, this singular circumstance that life creates of moving forward and depriving to get satisfaction. So happiness can't be just hidden behind a veil and saying it doesn't work, sort of like perfect and things like that, because it doesn't apply. I'm not perfect, and so on and so forth. Perfect. Well, who cares? There's a perfect for certain circumstances, but perfect for what circumstances? Applying to what circumstances? I'm not a perfect human being. Well, what's the prerequisites for a perfect human being? Whatever. Same old crappy cliche kind of questions, right? So yeah, you're perfect, but you can't you don't have to hide perfect behind some kind of veil that a word it can be used. You just have to apply it in the right way. But it's been applied in these ways, not necessarily sparingly, but in abundance to these situations. I'm happy we're applying it to the situation, even if we don't necessarily think the situation, recognizing the situation, say of deprivation and getting satisfaction out of these deprivations, and applying happy doesn't seem you can apply to it. Sort of like semantics, happy doesn't necessarily have to be hidden behind a veil because you don't think you can apply it to the situation, although that's where the word was derived from, was the situations creating these things that we call happy. So it's a matter of semantics and words and associations and things like that. So yes, happy is kind of a vague word. Applying happy and joy and fulfillment. I think happy is a better word. Happy, 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 and sappy, sappy, sappy. I'm happy and I'm sappy. So yes. Sappy is a real word because it's applied more to the real emotions of the world that we're living in, based on the reality that we're living in. So sappy, you're more sappy emotional and things like that. So that's something that could be more applied than happy. Happy is a state of mind. It's a projection based on satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy, based off of ego gratification, an ego fulfillment, an ego experiencing this perception, coming in and out and interacting with the environment. And happiness doesn't necessarily have to be hidden behind a veil because it's derived from these interactions, even if the interactions based on, say, a philosopher's point of view and recognizing the world that we're living in, it doesn't mean that it can't be applied, because applied to a situation such as a deprivation and satisfaction. It can be applied to the satisfaction because there's still that relative scale. And even though you recognize that it's just it's a scale based on a negative leading to a positive, creating the zero-sum game, you need the negative first to create the positive. Even though if there is a scale that you're going on, even if there is satisfaction, it's based on a negative deprivation. But just because there's a negative deprivation, you're still going into a positive state once you're satisfied. Getting to the satisfaction is still a positive state, but it's based on these redundancies, but you need the negative first, and the greater the negative, the more likely you're going to have a greater positive, and so on and so forth, and back to the whole life's not worth living because of these deprivations, but that's what creates the life game, and so on, so forth, so on, so forth, so on, so forth. So yes, happiness doesn't have to be disqualified as a word to use, sort of like all these other words I've talked about. It just has to be applied in a certain way, based on these very vague and broad sense of just using these words based on how they were derived from the situations creating these things and these concepts based on the reality that we're living in. So you can still be happy. Happy is still a word you can use to an idea of getting out of a deprivation. And that scale still exists based on being in a negative and a positive. The relationship of getting to a positive still exists, but it's still a zero-sum game because you need the negative first to get to the positive. So yes, and we're constantly moving forward, and we're being pushed through a momentum. And it's not about the satisfaction; it's about the push and momentum, and about getting to one place. It's about the chase. It's more about getting what you want. It's more about getting the chase, and the chase game propelling us forward because there's an inevitable end, and that's why the mechanism probably works the way it does, is because beginning and end, and it's about propelling. And since there is an end, there doesn't have to be much in the middle to create some kind of meaning. The beginning and the end create the meaning, but the sentience is another something that you can create into applying to this kind of thing, which creates these states of mind. The sentience being subjected to these crude forces of momentum of moving forward based on this mechanism caused by beginning and end. That's why there doesn't have to be much of a way of some kind of meaning, some kind of fulfilling purpose other than these perceptual things that we create, like happiness and fulfillment and joy, applying it to this word that I'm using. And that's why doesn't have to be much, meaning. It could just be two pieces of bread and a piece of cheese in the middle. It doesn't have to be much of anything. There doesn't have to be like two pieces of bread, and so you hold them an inch apart, and there's nothing in between them. There's nothing between the beginning and the end. The beginning creates everything that leads to an end, and the end is a piece of bread, and the beginning's a piece of bread, and everything in the middle is just air. It's very thin. It's very ethereal, and that's why the momentum that we have leading to some kind of end there's not much you can grab onto. Even if you're caught up in the game, even if you're caught up in the game, there's nothing to hold on to. You can still recognize it. It's about a matter of denial, I think, more than anything. So this momentum we're caught up in, and based on the air in the middle of the sandwich, or the two pieces of bread, that's the life game that we're living. The momentum leading to the meaning of an end, based on the meaning that was caused by a beginning. But the meaning that was inevitably created by this air in between was this consciousness, and that's all those little particles in between, like the individual people. It means something. It's still there. There's still something, and it's about like the air in the middle. You're still trying to satisfy something. You're still trying to get rid of a deprivation, but that's the emptiness as well. And between those two pieces of bread is the emptiness of satisfying those negatives. That's the nothing. You're just satisfying the satisfaction based off of a negative, leading to a zero sum again, leading to your satisfaction, leading to you satisfy, but then it's like, oh, I'm satisfied. Then you have to get down again. It's like you have to go all the way down, and it's like looking down, and then you have to go all the way down, and so on and so forth. It creates the meaning, but the meaning's created off of nothing. It's created off of deprivation. So that's what makes the nothing game. The momentum leading to nothing to grasp. Everything's ethereal, sort of like the perception thing, and the happiness thing, and the satisfaction, and the beauty, and all these things, applying this vague concepts to this this idea I want to get to as well. And it's thin air because it's momentum. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no real meaning except the sentience thing. And the sentience thing, and based on the satisfaction that we're trying to get, is based off of a negative. So it almost creates a nothing anyway, but it still means something because there's a sentient being subjected to these crude forces moving forward. Even our own biological processes and such and so forth, and happiness, and these things, these ideas that come into our head based off these biological processes, being subjected to beauty and lust and things like that. Those are crude forces as well, our crude psychology, and where this intelligence is experienced, in this intelligence in one moving forward and recognizing what we're living in as being subjected constantly to fighting these crude forces and crude psychology leading up to something. So yeah, we're nothing. Happiness is a state of mind. It doesn't need to be put in a veil. It still be applied based on how it was derived from all these situations. It's still a word you can apply because it was it originated based on the application of reality and understanding. But based on how vague it is, you can apply it more thoroughly and such. And same thing with beauty. It's lust and things like that. Going back to the whole idea of love. It's subjective perception and projection, what you find attractive, and so on and so forth, based on these other concepts of lust. And the empty bread, the empty sandwich, the particles in between the air, or whatever it may be, empty sandwich, two pieces of bread spread across, and there's a very thin veil, a little thin line in between of air. There's nothing in between, but there's just enough nothing in between to notice that it's a nothing sandwich, and not just two pieces of bread put together. And the nothing is the deprivation that creates, the nothingness of just a zero-sum game, creating a deprivation to get a positive, and the idea of this nothingness, this perception, more than recognized, even if you don't recognize, of moving forward, and based on this momentum, and the end creates the meaning of the beginning, and the cause and effect, the middle, just as much as the beginning. So the beginning and the end create the meaning, and the momentum in the middle means that you don't need anything necessarily to grasp onto, a perception, or anything like that, regardless if you recognize it or not, to hold on to. So you don't need those kinds of things to hold on to it, regardless. So that creates nothing, and the zero-sum game creates nothing in the nothing sandwich, and the big bread is beginning and the end. So regardless, the nothing is the zero-sum game that we're existing in to get the deprivation, to get to the positive, and the momentum of not really having this perception, regardless of your perception having it, of just momentum moving forward, and that's all it's about, regardless of your state of mind, and so on and so forth. So I want to end this video, so thank you, and until next time, goodbye. Bye.